Hey, welcome to How to Play, brought to you by the Games Capital. Today we're looking at one of my favourite games, Stone Age. Now Stone Age is currently being made by Z-Man Games. It's for 2 to 4 players and plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. Now it's what we refer to as a worker placement game. Now basically what that means is each player will have a set of little wooden men that they place out onto the board to take actions. Now before we look at how the game actually works, let's examine what's in the box. Let's have a look at the components. Now this game is visually stunning. The first thing you're going to notice is this beautifully illustrated game board that depicts a Stone Age village and the surrounding areas, including fields, forests, mountains, hills, etc. The game also comes with lots of wooden pieces representing the various resources that you're going to collect during the game. So there's timber, there's clay, there's stone, and also gold. Each player also has a set of wooden tribesmen which they will use to place out onto the board to carry out actions. There's also wooden markers for scoring and also for keeping track of your food production. There are food tiles, there are tools and also building tiles, as well as a deck of civilization cards. There's also a leather dice cup and 7 dice, and each player has their own player board, which is used to store some of the things that they collect during the game and also provides some references that you'll need during the game. So that's the components. Let's find out how you play this great game. Now, as I mentioned before, Stone Age is a worker placement game. So basically what that means is that each player on their turn will be able to place workers out onto the board to carry out actions. At the start of the game, each player has 5 workers that they can use. On your turn, you can place 1 or more workers onto a specific location on the board. So first of all, let's examine the options that you have within the village. There are 3 locations in the village where you can place workers to take actions. The first of these is the toolmaker's hut. Now by placing a worker into the toolmaker's hut, you can collect one of these tools, place it on your player board. Those tools are used later when you're collecting resources. The second location is the field. By placing a worker into the field, you're increasing your tribe's food production. There's a chart over this side of the board which keeps track of that. By placing a worker there, you can move your cube 1 space up, showing the amount of food that your tribe produces each turn. And the final location that you can place workers on in the village is the hut. When you place workers there, you must place 2 workers at a time. After you do that, you can take another worker into your tribe, which will give you extra actions on subsequent turns. And they're the locations in the village. There are 5 locations across the top of the board where you can collect resources. Essentially, they all work the same way. The only difference being the first location, called the hunt, where you collect food. There's no limit to the amount of workers that can go into that particular location. Each of the other spots, there's a limit of 7 workers. So once those spots are taken, no other workers can be placed. Now, for example, if it was my turn and I wanted to collect timber, I could put any number of workers into that area that I have. For example, I could place 3 workers straight into the forest. Now, when it comes time to activate those workers and take the action, I would take 1 dice per worker. So in this instance, I would take 3 dice, place them into the dice cup, and roll those dice. Then I would add the total of the dice that I've rolled. So in this instance, I've rolled 2 6s and a 2, which gives me a total of 14. Now, to determine how many timber I get, I look at my player board. Timber has a value of 3, so I would divide the total of my dice by 3, and that would tell me how many timber I get. So 14 divided by 3 tells me that I get 4 timber, and there's 2 dice points left over, which I can't do anything about, unless I happen to have a tool in my possession. If I have a tool, for every tool that I've got, I can add 1 dice point to my total. So I could use that tool to make the total of the dice 15, in which case I would get 1 extra timber. So the tools can come in quite handy. You can also place workers on the buildings that are located at the bottom of the board in order to earn points. So if you were to place a worker on that building, you would need to be able to cash in the required resources in order to claim the points. So for example, on this particular building, you would need to be able to give a clay, a stone and a gold in order to claim the 15 points. Then you would place that building onto your player board. Most of the buildings work in the same way. There's a couple of differences though. For example, this particular tile has a variable amount of points, so it really depends on what resources you cash in as to what points you'll get. So for example, this one shows a 4 at the bottom, and the icon behind it indicates each of the resource types. So what this is saying is that you can cash in 4 of any resource to claim points. However, there is another icon here which shows 3 of those symbols, indicating that of those 4 resources, they must be of 3 different kinds. So for example, I could cash in 2 gold, 1 stone and 1 timber, and that would meet the requirements of that card. The points I would get, once again, you refer to your player board and the points that are associated with each of those particular resources. So gold is worth 6, stone 5, and so on, and I would get points accordingly. You can also place workers onto the cards located here at the bottom of the board as well. There's a cost associated with each card. The first card costs 1 resource, the second 2 resources, and so on. Now when you place a worker onto the card and pay the resources, you get to take the card, and there is an immediate benefit. The top half of the card shows what you get instantly, and it could be extra resources, could be food, could be a tool. There's a whole heap of different things that you can get from the cards. Then also, the bottom half of the card shows you some sort of bonus that you're going to get at the end of the game, depending on certain conditions. Now, this particular card has a symbol at the bottom with a green background. There are 8 different symbols in the game, and by collecting different symbols, you will earn bonus points. There's a chart, once again, on your player board that indicates how many points you'll get for each different symbol. The other 4 ways to earn points relate to various things that you might have been able to achieve during the game. So for example, this card has 2 workers noted on it and also a food symbol. Now what this is referring to is the food track. So depending on how far up the food track you are, you will earn bonus points. So at the end of the game, you would count up the total of your workers that are shown on these cards, multiplied by your location on the food track, and you'd earn points accordingly. Now there's also points that you can earn for collecting tools during the game. There are points for the number of workers that you have at game end, and also points for the number of buildings that you might have been able to build during the game. After each player has placed all of their workers out onto the board, then in turn order, each player will resolve all of their actions. Doesn't matter what order that you choose to do them in, you do all of your actions before moving to the next player. Then the next player will do the same, and so on. Once each player has completed all of their actions, then you must feed all of your workers. Each worker requires 1 food. This can be minimised by the food track, so depending on where you are on the food track, you may have to pay less food. If you don't have enough food to feed your workers, then you have to pay resources for each missing food. If you haven't got enough resources, then you're going to lose 10 points, so that's not a good idea. The game will end when either one of these building stacks is completely depleted, or there aren't enough cards to fill up the empty spaces. Once that happens, the game ends, you add up all of your bonus points for cards that you've collected, and whoever has the most points is the winner. In summary, in player order, each player places workers on the board, 1 location at a time. Then, each player resolves all his actions in any order. At the end of each round, players must feed their workers. The game ends when there are not enough cards to replenish, or one of the building stacks is exhausted. Final bonus points are tallied, and the player with the highest score is the winner. And that's Stone Age. Now I love this game, not just because it looks so great, but it plays really well. It just makes sense. But a tip for new players, do not neglect the cards in this game. The bonus points that you get at the end of the game can really make a difference. Anyway, thanks for watching and happy gaming.